I stared at my phone as the email loaded. My photo, my face, and underneath, in bold red letters, fired for leaving 1 minute early. Do not rehire. Sent to every single employee at Westbridge Technologies. 347 people now had proof of my supposed incompetence in their inboxes. My hands shook as I read Diana's name in the sender field. Our HR director had just destroyed my reputation in one click. What she didn't know was that I'd already made a phone call, and in 72 hours, her world would collapse. My name is Georgia, and 3 days before that email ruined my life, I was a senior compliance auditor at Westbridge Technologies. I'm 32 years old, and I'd worked at that company for 6 years. 6 years of perfect attendance, glowing performance reviews, and a recent promotion that came with a salary bump to $68,000 a year. It wasn't a fortune, but it was stable. It was security, and for a single mom raising a 7-year-old daughter alone, stability meant everything. Emma is my world. She has my dark hair and her father's hazel eyes, though he hasn't been in the picture since she was 2. My parents died in a car accident 4 years ago, so it's just the 2 of us. No family nearby. No safety net. Just me, my job, and the careful budget that kept us afloat in our 2-bedroom apartment in a decent school district. Westbridge Technologies is a government contractor. We handle sensitive federal data systems for various agencies. My job was to make sure we stayed compliant with all the regulations that come with that territory. Labor laws, wage requirements, timekeeping accuracy, billing procedures. It sounds boring, but I was good at it. Really good. I caught problems before they became catastrophes. I saved the company from potential violations more times than I could count. The incident that destroyed everything happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I'd worked through lunch that day, staying at my desk to finish a compliance report while eating a sad sandwich from the vending machine. At 4:30, my phone rang. It was Emma's aftercare program at school. One of the supervisors was sick. They were short-staffed, and they needed parents to pick up by 5:15 instead of the usual 6. After that, they'd charge $6 per minute late. I checked the clock. 4:32. If I left right at 5, I could make it with maybe 3 minutes to spare, depending on traffic. But we had a strict policy. Office hours were 8 to 5. No exceptions. Except I'd stayed late at least twice a week for the past month, never asking for compensation or comp time. I'd come in early. I'd worked weekends when deadlines loomed. I walked to my supervisor's office. Tom Hayes was a decent guy, mid-40s, 3 kids of his own. He understood the juggling act. I explained the situation, asked if I could leave 1 minute early. Just 1 minute. He barely looked up from his computer. Yeah, sure, Georgia. You've been putting in extra hours anyway. Get out of here at 4:59. Go get your daughter. I thanked him and went back to my desk, relieved. At 4:59 exactly, I logged out of my computer, grabbed my purse, and headed for the door. I made it to Emma's school at 5:12. 3 minutes to spare. Emma ran to me with a drawing she'd made. A picture of the 2 of us holding hands under a rainbow. I hugged her tight and took her home, completely unaware that I'd just triggered a nightmare. The next morning, I arrived at work at 7:55, 5 minutes early as usual. I grabbed coffee from the break room and settled at my desk. At 8:30, my phone rang. It was Diana Kruger, our HR director. Her voice was ice. Georgia, I need you in my office. Now. I felt my stomach drop. Diana wasn't someone you wanted attention from. She'd been with Westbridge for 15 years and ran the HR department like her personal kingdom. She was in her late 40s, always dressed in severe black suits, her blonde hair pulled back so tight it looked painful. People joked that she kept a list of employees she wanted to fire and just waited for an excuse. I walked to her office on the 3rd floor. The door was open. Diana sat behind her massive desk, her fingers steepled, her expression cold. She didn't invite me to sit. I reviewed the security logs from yesterday, she said. You left at 4:59. Yes, I said. I had an emergency with my daughter's aftercare. Tom gave me permission. Tom doesn't have the authority to override company policy. But I've stayed late so many times without asking for overtime. I just needed 1 minute. Diana's eyes narrowed. What you did is called time theft. You're a salaried employee, and you're expected to work your full hours. You set a dangerous precedent. What if everyone decided to leave early? What if everyone thought the rules didn't apply to them? My heart pounded. Diana, I'm happy to make up the time. I'll stay an extra hour today. I'll work through lunch for a week. Whatever you need. That's not the point. She opened a folder on her desk. You've demonstrated that you can't be trusted to follow policy. You've shown poor judgment and a lack of professionalism. Effective immediately, your employment with Westbridge Technologies is terminated. The room tilted. What? You're firing me? For 1 minute? For time theft and insubordination. You knowingly violated policy. I had permission from my supervisor. Your supervisor is in HR. Security, please escort Georgia Martinez from the building. I hadn't even noticed the security guard standing in the hallway. He was a younger guy named Chris who'd always been friendly. Now he wouldn't meet my eyes. Within 20 minutes, my badge was taken, my laptop confiscated, my desk cleared. Chris even took the framed photos of Emma I kept next to my monitor. He walked me through the office, while people stared. I saw Tom at his desk looking stricken, but he didn't say anything. Nobody did. They put my belongings in a cardboard box and escorted me to my car. I sat in the parking lot for an hour, numb. This couldn't be real. I couldn't be fired. I had rent due in 12 days, $1,800. I had Emma's school tuition, $400 due in a week. Car payment, $375. I pulled up my bank account on my phone, $943. That was it. I drove home in a daze, trying to figure out how to tell Emma. But when I got there, my phone buzzed. Email notification. I opened it. That's when I saw it. Company-wide distribution. From Diana Kruger to all company. My professional headshot from the company directory. And underneath in red text, fired for leaving 1 minute early. Do not rehire. My phone started buzzing immediately. Text messages. Dozens of them. Some from coworkers expressing shock and sympathy. Others just said, "Wow," or "What happened?" A few were cruel. One said, "Guess you should have followed the rules." I sat on my couch and stared at that email for 20 minutes. Diana hadn't just fired me. She'd humiliated me. She'd made sure everyone in the company, everyone I'd worked with for 6 years, knew exactly why I was gone. She'd branded me as incompetent, as a rule breaker, as someone not worth rehiring. That night, after Emma went to bed asking why Mommy seemed sad, I sat at my kitchen table trying to figure out how we'd survive. I pulled out my laptop and started looking at my budget. Rent, utilities, food, insurance. My health insurance through Westbridge ended immediately. Emma's too. I'd have to find coverage on my own, which would cost hundreds a month. And then I remembered something. 3 weeks ago, I'd been conducting a routine compliance audit of our timekeeping system. We'd recently upgraded to a new software platform, and part of my job was making sure it calculated employee hours correctly, especially for our hourly workers. Westbridge employed about 200 people. Most were salaried like me, but 83 were hourly. Maintenance staff, administrative assistants, junior analysts, still in training. I'd noticed something odd. The system was automatically rounding down clock-out times. Not by much. 6 to 8 minutes per shift. An employee would clock out at 5:07, and the system would record it as 5. Someone would clock out at 1:34 after lunch, and it showed 1:30. I'd flagged it. I'd written a detailed report. I'd sent it directly to Diana, as required by protocol, because timekeeping discrepancies involving federal contractors are serious business. The Department of Labor has strict rules about wage and hour compliance. Diana had called me into her office the next day. She'd dismissed it, said it was a clerical error in how the software imported data, told me to delete the report from the shared drive and stop being so uptight about minor issues. She'd actually used those words. Stop being so uptight, Georgia. Not everything is a federal case. I deleted it from the shared drive as instructed. But I'd kept a personal copy. It was a habit from my auditing training. Always keep backup documentation. Always have a paper trail. I pulled that file up now. I reviewed it carefully. The rounding wasn't random. It was systematic. Every hourly employee was affected. 6 to 8 minutes per shift. Twice a day. Over the course of a year, that was roughly 50 to 60 hours of unpaid work per employee, times 83 employees. That was nearly 5,000 hours of stolen wages. I did the math. Average hourly wage for those employees was about $18. 5,000 hours times $18. $90,000. And this had been going on for at least 2 years since the system was implemented. That was closer to $300,000 in wage theft. And Westbridge wasn't just any company. We were a federal contractor. We held a $23 million contract with the Department of Defense. Federal contractors are held to higher standards. If the Department of Labor found out about systematic wage theft, we'd face massive fines. We could lose our contracts. We could be barred from future federal work. Diana had fired the one person who knew about the fraud and could document it. She'd fired me the day after I'd asked to leave 1 minute early, and she'd done it in a way that destroyed my reputation, making sure I couldn't fight back without looking like a disgruntled employee making false accusations. But she'd made one critical mistake. She'd left me with nothing to lose. The morning after that email went out, I filed for unemployment benefits. It was humiliating. But I needed something while I looked for work. I filled out the online forms, explained I'd been terminated, and submitted my claim. 3 days later, I got a notice. Westbridge was contesting it. They claimed I'd been fired for cause, specifically for time theft and violation of company policy. The unemployment office flagged my claim for review. The process would take 4 to 6 weeks. I couldn't wait 4 to 6 weeks. Rent was due in 9 days. I started applying to jobs immediately. I sent out 17 applications in 3 days. Compliance auditor positions, financial analyst roles, anything in my field. I customized each cover letter, highlighted my experience, emphasized my attention to detail. 6 companies called me back within a week. I was hopeful. Maybe I could land something quickly. The first interview went well. It was a mid-sized tech company, similar to Westbridge. The hiring manager seemed impressed by my resume. We talked for 45 minutes. She said she'd need to check my references and get back to me. 2 days later, I got an email. We've decided to move forward with other candidates. Thank you for your interest. The same thing happened with the second interview. And the third. By the fourth interview, I was starting to panic. These were jobs I was overqualified for. Positions I should have been a shoo-in for. Something was wrong. I called a former coworker, Jennifer, someone I'd considered a friend. She was one of the few people who'd texted me something kind after the email went out. I asked her if she'd heard anything, if people at Westbridge were saying things about me that might be affecting my job search. Jennifer was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Georgia, you should know something. HR sent out an internal memo. Anyone who gets called for a reference on you is supposed to forward the call directly to Diana. She's handling all reference checks personally." My blood went cold. What is she telling them? I don't know for sure. But Emma from accounting had a friend who works at Tech Core Industries. They called Westbridge about you last week. After they talked to Diana, they withdrew your candidacy. Emma's friend said Diana told them you were terminated for theft and dishonesty. I felt like I'd been punched. Diana wasn't just blocking my unemployment. She was poisoning every reference, telling potential employers I was a thief. I had no way to fight it. How do you prove someone is lying about you when they're in a position of authority and you're just an unemployed single mom? It got worse. Someone at Westbridge, I never found out who, took a screenshot of Diana's termination email. They posted it on a local professional networking group on social media. The post said, "Be careful who you hire. This is what happens when you don't take company policies seriously." The post got shared 47 times. My LinkedIn was suddenly flooded with connection requests from people I didn't know. People who just wanted to see the drama. I started getting messages from strangers. Some were supportive, saying the firing seemed excessive. Others lectured me about professionalism and following rules. One person sent me a long message about how millennials don't respect workplace authority. I shut down my social media. I couldn't take it anymore. Emma started noticing something was wrong. She asked why I was home during the day. I told her Mommy's job had changed, and I was looking for a new one. She asked why I seemed sad all the time. I tried to smile and said I was just tired. But 7-year-olds are perceptive. She knew something was wrong. One night, after I put her to bed, I sat on the bathroom floor and cried for an hour. I'd never felt so powerless, so humiliated, so utterly defeated. The next morning, I forced myself to look at my documentation again. The wage theft file, the emails, the time records. I couldn't let Diana win. I couldn't let this company get away with stealing from people who had even less power than I did. I researched the Department of Labor's Wage and Hour Division. I read about how to file a complaint. I learned about whistleblower protections for people who report violations. I spent 3 hours drafting a detailed complaint, attaching all my documentation, explaining the systematic rounding, showing the financial impact. I hit submit at 11:43 at night. The confirmation email said an investigator would be in touch within 10 business days. For the first time in a week, I felt like maybe I'd done something right. Maybe I could fight back. That feeling lasted exactly 48 hours. On a Thursday afternoon, someone knocked on my apartment door. I opened it to find a courier with a certified letter. I signed for it, confused. The return address was from Parker, Stevenson, and White, attorneys at law. I opened it with shaking hands. It was a cease and desist letter. 6 pages of legal language that boiled down to this. Westbridge Technologies was threatening to sue me for defamation, breach of confidentiality, theft of proprietary information, and attempted extortion. They claimed I was making false accusations against the company to get revenge for a legitimate termination. They claimed the documents I'd taken were confidential and that sharing them with government agencies constituted theft. They demanded I destroy all company materials in my possession, retract any statements I'd made to government agencies, and cease all communication about Westbridge. If I didn't comply within 10 days, they would file a civil lawsuit against me seeking hundreds of thousands of dollars in damages. I read the letter 3 times. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the pages. I had no lawyer, no money for a lawyer. I had $943 in my bank account, and rent due in 6 days. I'd thought I was fighting back. Instead, I'd just painted a target on my back. Westbridge had resources I couldn't even imagine. A legal team. Money. Power. What did I have? A one-bedroom apartment I was about to lose, and a 7-year-old daughter who depended on me. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, wondering if I'd made a catastrophic mistake. Maybe I should have just taken the firing quietly. Maybe I should have found a new job and moved on. Now I was facing potential legal action that could destroy me completely. By the time the sun came up, I'd made a decision. I had to back down. I had to protect Emma. I couldn't risk losing everything. But before I could call the Department of Labor to withdraw my complaint, my phone rang. The phone call was from a restricted number. I almost didn't answer. But something made me pick up. "Miss Martinez?" A woman's voice, professional and clipped. "Yes? This is the Department of Labor. Wage and Hour Division. I'm calling regarding your complaint. We need to schedule an interview to discuss your allegations." I froze. The cease and desist letter was sitting on my kitchen table. I was supposed to retract everything, but the investigator was already calling me. I'm not sure I should continue with this," I said. There was a pause. "Miss Martinez, has someone contacted you? Threatened you?" "I received a letter from Westbridge's attorneys. They're threatening to sue me." "That's retaliation," the woman said. "And it's illegal. Can you send me a copy of that letter?" I did. Within 2 hours, the investigator called back. Her name was Patricia Wells, and she'd been with the Department of Labor for 12 years. She told me that threatening a whistleblower with legal action to prevent them from cooperating with a federal investigation was a serious violation. She also told me my complaint had raised enough red flags that they were opening a formal investigation. But that didn't solve my immediate problem. The rent was due in 4 days, and I had nowhere near enough money. I swallowed my pride and called my landlord, a man named Frank who owned the building. I explained I'd been fired. I was looking for work. I just needed a little time. Could I pay half now and half in 2 weeks? Frank was sympathetic but firm. "Georgia, you're a good tenant, but I've got a mortgage on this building. I can't carry people. I'll give you a 5-day notice to pay or quit. If you can't pay in 5 days, you'll have to leave." I hung up and stared at my bank account. $412 left. I'd bought groceries, paid my phone bill, put gas in the car. I couldn't make even half the rent. I started selling things. My old laptop on Facebook Marketplace. Some furniture I didn't absolutely need. A bookshelf. A small TV from my bedroom. I made $380. It wasn't enough. But maybe if I begged Frank again, showed him I was trying. Emma asked why I was selling our things. I told her we were simplifying, getting rid of stuff we didn't use. She looked at me with those big hazel eyes and asked, "Are we going to be okay, Mommy?" I hugged her and lied. "Of course, baby. Everything's going to be fine." 8 days after I filed my complaint with the Department of Labor, I heard nothing. No update. No interview. Patricia had said they'd be in touch, but silence stretched on. I started to think maybe Westbridge's lawyers had scared them off. Maybe powerful companies always win these battles. Then I got another email. This one was from Diana directly, not a company-wide distribution. The subject line was, "A note of concern." I opened it, my heart pounding. "Georgia, I've become aware that you're making serious accusations against Westbridge Technologies. I'm sad to see you going down this path. As someone who worked with you for 6 years, I had always thought you were rational and professional. It's clear to me now that the stress of your termination has affected your judgment. I genuinely hope you get the help you need to move past this difficult time. Sincerely, Diana Kruger." It sounded concerned, sympathetic even, but it was copied to 17 people. 17 contacts in our industry, HR directors at other companies, hiring managers. Professional connections Diana had cultivated over 15 years. She was systematically destroying my reputation, making it look like I was unstable, a disgruntled employee making false accusations because I couldn't handle being fired. Anyone who might hire me would see this email and think twice. He felt Ray like I'd never felt before. But Ray doesn't pay rent. The 5-day notice came. I couldn't pay. Frank was apologetic but gave me a formal eviction notice. I had 10 days to vacate the apartment. I didn't have 10 days. I didn't have anything. I went to a food bank for the first time in my life. A church on the south side of town that gave out groceries on Tuesday afternoons. I stood in line with Emma, avoiding eye contact with the other people there, feeling a shame so deep it made my chest ache. The volunteers were kind. They gave us a box of canned goods, some pasta, bread, peanut butter. Emma carried the bread and thought it was an adventure. I wanted to cry. That night, I hit absolute rock bottom. I sat at our kitchen table after Emma was asleep and searched for homeless shelters, women and children's shelters. I looked up which ones had the best reviews, which ones were safest. I bookmarked 3 of them. This was really happening. I was going to be homeless. My daughter was going to be homeless because I'd left work 1 minute early. The next afternoon, something unexpected happened. I ran into Tom Hayes at a coffee shop near my apartment. He was in line ahead of me. When he turned and saw me, his face went pale. "Georgia," he said. "Tom." We stared at each other for a long, awkward moment. Then he stepped out of line and gestured for me to follow him outside. "I'm so sorry," he said once we were on the sidewalk. "I tried to speak up for you. I told Diana I'd given you permission to leave early. She told me if I didn't drop it, she'd find a reason to fire me too." "I understand," I said. And I did. Tom had 3 kids and a wife who didn't work. He couldn't risk his job. He looked around nervously, then pulled a business card from his wallet. "There's an employment attorney. Her name is Susan Crawford. She does some pro bono work. I can't promise anything, but maybe she can help." He pressed the card into my hand and walked away quickly, looking over his shoulder like he was afraid someone was watching. That evening, I called Susan Crawford. Her receptionist said she was booked, but I left a detailed message. To my shock, Susan called me back within 2 hours. She said she'd read about my case online, the screenshot that had gone viral. She wanted to meet. We met the next day at her office. I brought every document I had. The termination letter, Diana's emails, the wage theft report, the cease and desist letter. Susan reviewed everything with a sharp, practiced eye. "This is textbook retaliation," she said. "You reported illegal wage practices, and they fired you. Then they tried to intimidate you into silence. Under federal whistleblower protection statutes, this is a slam-dunk case." "I don't have money for an attorney," I said. "I'll take it on contingency. You don't pay unless we win. And trust me, we're going to win." For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of hope. That same night, my phone rang. Unknown number. I answered cautiously. "Miss Martinez?" "This is Special Agent Cole Patterson from the Department of Labor's Office of Inspector General." My heart stopped. "Office of Inspector General?" "Yes, ma'am. Patricia Wells forwarded your complaint to us because what she found raised some serious concerns. Once we started digging into your allegations, we discovered some irregularities in how Westbridge Technologies bills the federal government for labor hours on their Department of Defense contract. This isn't just about wage theft anymore. We're looking at potential federal contract fraud." I couldn't breathe. "What does that mean?" "It means we need you to cooperate fully with our investigation. We need your documentation. We need you to testify. I have to warn you, this is going to get harder before it gets easier. Westbridge will fight back. But if the fraud is as extensive as it appears, you'll be protected under federal whistleblower laws. And under the False Claims Act, You could be entitled to a percentage of any funds we recover. How much are we talking about? We're still investigating, but potentially millions. I looked around my tiny apartment, at the eviction notice on the refrigerator, at the empty space where our couch used to be. I'll do whatever you need, I said. And just like that, I went from a fired single mom to the star witness in a federal fraud investigation. Special Agent Patterson and his team arrived at Westbridge Technologies on a Wednesday morning at 9:15. I wasn't there, obviously, but Tom texted me from a burner phone he'd bought specifically to keep me updated. He said 3 agents in suits walked in with boxes and a warrant. They spent 3 days on site. They seized documents. They imaged computers. They interviewed employees one by one. Tom said Diana was furious. She kept demanding to know who filed the complaint. The agents wouldn't tell her. She threatened legal action. They informed her that threatening federal investigators was a crime. She went pale and shut up. I felt a grim satisfaction, but it was short-lived. 4 days after the agents left Westbridge, Susan called me. Her voice was tight. Georgia, Westbridge just filed a civil lawsuit against you. They're claiming you stole proprietary information, that you're engaged in a malicious campaign to destroy the company, and they're seeking $500,000 in damages. My knees went weak. $500,000? I don't have $500. It's a slap suit. Strategic lawsuit against public participation. It's designed to intimidate you into silence. They know they'll probably lose, but they're counting on you being too scared or too broke to fight back. We're going to file a motion to dismiss, but you need to prepare yourself. This is going to get ugly. It got ugly fast. The local business newspaper picked up the story. The headline was, "Former Westbridge employee accused of corporate espionage." The article made me sound like a criminal. It mentioned the lawsuit, but barely touched on my allegations against the company. I was painted as a disgruntled thief. My name was everywhere. When I Googled myself, the first 10 results were all about the lawsuit. My LinkedIn profile views skyrocketed, but no one was reaching out to offer jobs. They were just watching the train wreck. Meanwhile, my eviction proceeded. I had to leave the apartment. Susan helped me find a cheap efficiency unit in a rough part of town. Month to month. $650. It was one room with a hot plate, a bathroom down the hall that I shared with 3 other units, and bars on the windows. The walls were thin. I could hear our neighbors arguing at all hours. Emma cried when she saw it. "This is where we're going to live?" I knelt down and hugged her. "Just for a little while, baby. Just until Mommy finds a new job." But finding a job was impossible. The lawsuit made me radioactive. No company would touch me. Emma's private school called. My account was 60 days past due. Without payment, they'd have to withdraw her. I begged for more time, but they had policies. Emma's last day was a Friday. The following Monday, I enrolled her in the public school near our new apartment. The school was overcrowded and underfunded. Emma, who was sensitive and shy, struggled immediately. Kids made fun of her clothes, her backpack, the fact that she was new. She came home crying twice in the first week. I held her and felt like the world's worst mother. She started having nightmares. She'd wake up screaming. I'd run to her mattress on the floor. We couldn't afford a bed frame, and hold her while she sobbed. She started wetting the bed, something she hadn't done since she was 4. I'd wake up at 3 in the morning to change sheets and reassure her that everything was okay, even though everything was falling apart. I was failing her. Failing at the one job that mattered. Agent Patterson called for a follow-up interview. We met at a federal building downtown. He had more information now, and it was worse than I'd imagined. "The timekeeping fraud you identified was just the beginning," he said. "Westbridge has been billing the federal government for employee hours that were never actually worked. They round down employee time, but they bill the government for the full hours. They've been pocketing the difference. We're talking about potentially $2 million over 3 years. I felt dizzy. The CEO, Craig Thornton, and your HR director, Diana Kruger, implemented the system together. We have emails. We have the billing records. This is criminal fraud, Miss Martinez. If we can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt, they're going to prison. What do you need from me? We need you to testify before a grand jury. We need you on the record. I have to warn you, once you do this, there's no going back. Westbridge is going to come after you, with everything they have. Their lawyers are going to try to destroy your credibility. They're going to paint you as a liar. Are you prepared for that? I thought about Emma sleeping on a mattress in a room with bars on the windows. I thought about Diana's smug face. I thought about the 83 employees who'd been stolen from, who probably had no idea. I'm ready, I said. The next day, everything got worse. I got a phone call from Westbridge's legal team. Not a threatening letter this time, an actual offer. Diana herself left me a voicemail. Her voice was honey-sweet, completely different from the Ice Queen who'd fired me. Georgia, I've been doing a lot of thinking. I believe there were misunderstandings on both sides. I'd like to offer you your job back. Full back pay for the time you've been out. A promotion to Director of Compliance. Salary of $85,000. We'll send a company-wide email apologizing for the way your termination was handled. All you need to do is sign a settlement agreement. It includes a mutual non-disclosure clause and an agreement to withdraw your complaint with the Department of Labor. You have 48 hours to decide. I hope you'll do the right thing for yourself and for Emma. She said my daughter's name, like a threat, wrapped in kindness. I stared at my phone. $85,000. My job back. Vindication. Emma could go back to her old school. We could move out of this terrible apartment. We could have our lives back, but I'd have to betray 83 people who'd been stolen from. I'd have to let Craig and Diana get away with defrauding taxpayers of $2 million. I'd have to sign away my right to speak the truth. I called Susan. I told her about the offer. It's bribery, she said flatly. They're panicking. If you accept this, you become complicit. You give up your whistleblower protections. And Westbridge continues defrauding the government and stealing from employees. The decision is yours, Georgia, but you should know what you're giving up. I looked at Emma, who was coloring at our tiny table. She was drawing another picture of us holding hands. This time we were standing in front of a big house with a garden. I made my decision. I called Diana back and declined the offer. 48 hours later, the real war began. I'd thought I understood what rock bottom felt like. I was wrong. After I declined Westbridge's settlement offer, their legal team went nuclear. They filed an emergency motion to freeze any assets I had, claiming I posed a flight risk and had stolen company property worth tens of thousands of dollars. It was absurd. I had $217 in my bank account, but the motion was granted temporarily until a hearing could be scheduled 3 days later. Those 3 days were hell. I couldn't access my bank account at all. No money for food. No money for gas. Nothing. I went to a church food pantry again, this time taking enough supplies to last us through the weekend. Emma and I ate peanut butter sandwiches for 3 days straight. I told her we were having a peanut butter party. She smiled, but I could see the worry in her eyes. 7-year-olds shouldn't have to worry about food. Susan filed an emergency counter motion. At the hearing, the judge was visibly annoyed with Westbridge's lawyers. He lifted the asset freeze and sanctioned them for filing a frivolous motion. But that didn't undo the 3 days of hell we'd lived through. The harassment escalated in other ways, too. One evening, I was walking Emma home from school. It was a 6-block walk from her new school to our apartment. We were 2 blocks from home when a black SUV pulled up alongside us. 2 men in suits got out. They didn't touch us, but they started taking photos with expensive cameras. Rapid-fire clicking. "Miss Martinez, can you comment on the lawsuit?" one of them called out. Emma grabbed my hand, terrified. "Mommy, who are they?" "We're just trying to get both sides of the story," the other man said. "Where are you living now, Miss Martinez? How is your daughter adjusting to her new school?" They knew where Emma went to school. They were asking invasive questions about my child. I felt panic rise in my throat. I grabbed Emma and ran. Actually ran down the sidewalk, my heart pounding, Emma crying beside me. The men didn't follow, but I heard the camera shutters clicking behind us. When we got to our apartment, I locked the door and called the police. 2 officers showed up 40 minutes later. They took a report, but they were blunt about the reality. "Unless they threatened you directly or touched you, there's not much we can do," one officer said. "Taking photos in public isn't illegal. Asking questions isn't illegal. Best we can do is have a patrol car drive by your building a few times tonight." Private investigators. Westbridge had hired private investigators to follow me, to photograph my daughter, to intimidate me. I filed a restraining order request. The judge denied it. No direct threats, no grounds. Susan called me the next day with more bad news. The civil lawsuit was proceeding to discovery. That meant Westbridge's lawyers could subpoena all of my records. Phone logs, emails, bank statements, text messages. Everything. They'd put me under a microscope, looking for any inconsistency, any small lie, anything they could use to destroy my credibility. "They're also going to depose you," Susan said. "That means you'll sit in a room with their lawyers for hours while they ask you questions under oath. They'll try to trip you up, make you look unreliable. It's going to be brutal." "How long will this take?" "The lawsuit? Could be 2 years before we get to trial." 2 years. 2 years of this nightmare. My body started breaking down from the stress. I lost 16 pounds in 3 weeks. I couldn't eat. Food made me nauseous. I gave most of what we had to Emma. I started having panic attacks. My heart would race. My vision would blur. I'd feel like I was dying. The first time it happened, I thought I was having a heart attack. I couldn't sleep. I'd lie awake for hours, my mind racing through worst-case scenarios. What if I lost the case? What if they won a judgment against me? What if I went to prison for something I didn't do? What if Emma ended up in foster care? One night, the panic attack was so bad I collapsed. Emma found me on the floor of our tiny bathroom, hyperventilating, tears streaming down my face. She was terrified. She grabbed my phone and somehow managed to call 911. I woke up in the emergency room with an IV in my arm. A doctor told me I was severely dehydrated and malnourished. They kept me for 6 hours, pumped me full of fluids, and sent me home with a bill for $3,200 that I had absolutely no way to pay. Emma didn't leave my side for 2 days after that. She was scared I'd collapse again. I'd broken something in my daughter. I could see it in her eyes. She'd lost her sense of security, her trust that her mom could protect her. I'd never hated anyone the way I hated Diana Kruger in that moment. Then Tom called me. Not from his burner phone, from his regular number. His voice was shaking. "Georgia, I'm sorry. I've been subpoenaed. Westbridge's lawyers are making me testify against you. Diana's been coaching witnesses. She's telling people what to say. I tried to refuse, but they threatened to fire me. I have 3 kids. I can't lose my job. I'm so sorry." I wanted to scream at him, to tell him he was a coward. But I couldn't. He was just trying to survive. Same as me. "I understand," I said, and hung up. I was completely alone. No allies. No support. Just me and a traumatized 7-year-old against a corporation with unlimited resources. That night, I seriously considered giving up. Just signing whatever Westbridge wanted me to sign. Making it all stop. But then I remembered Agent Patterson's words. $2 million in fraud. 83 employees stolen from. If I gave up, they'd win. They'd keep doing it. And some other single mom would be the next victim. The next morning, Agent Patterson called. His voice was urgent. Georgia, we've uncovered something major. Westbridge wasn't just defrauding one contract. They've been doing this across multiple federal agencies: Department of Defense, Department of Energy, Homeland Security. The fraud totals nearly $7 million over 5 years. My breath caught. $7 million? We're bringing criminal charges. The Department of Justice is involved now. Craig Thornton and Diana Kruger are going to be indicted. But we need you to testify before a federal grand jury. This is it. This is how we take them down. What happens to me? The DOJ is prepared to offer you full whistleblower protection. If you need it, we can even arrange witness protection, though I don't think it'll come to that. And under the False Claims Act, you're entitled to receive 15 to 25% of whatever the government recovers. If we recover the full $7 million, that's over $1 million for you. $1 million. Enough to give Emma a real childhood. Enough to rebuild our lives. Enough to never worry about rent or food again. But I have to warn you, Patterson continued. Once you testify, you'll be the face of this case. Westbridge's defense lawyers are going to come after you hard. They'll try to destroy your reputation nationally. They'll dig up every mistake you've ever made. Your name will be in the news. It's going to get worse before it gets better. Much worse. I looked at Emma, who was eating cereal at our tiny table. She looked so small, so fragile. When do you need me to testify? I asked. 2 weeks. Can you do this? I thought about Diana's smug face, about Craig's expensive suits, about the 83 people who'd been robbed, about every taxpayer who'd been defrauded. Yes, I said, I can do this. The Department of Justice assigned me a victim witness coordinator, a kind woman named Beth, who helped me understand what testifying before a grand jury meant. She explained that it wouldn't be like TV. No defense lawyers in the room. Just me, the prosecutors, and the grand jurors. But my testimony would be used to secure indictments, which would then lead to a trial where everything would become much harder. Susan continued to represent me in the civil case. Between the criminal investigation and the lawsuit, my life became a blur of meetings with lawyers, reviewing documents, and preparing testimony. 1 week before I was scheduled to testify, I received another certified letter. I opened it with shaking hands. Westbridge was now claiming I'd fabricated the evidence. They said the documents I'd provided to investigators had been altered. They were filing criminal charges against me for fraud and perjury. Susan nearly threw her phone when I told her. It's completely false. The DOJ has verified every document you provided. They know it's authentic. This is just Westbridge's last desperate attempt to discredit you before the grand jury. But the accusation made headlines anyway. Whistleblower accused of fabricating evidence in federal case. The article ran in the business section of the local paper. My name, my photo. The implication that I was a liar. People in my neighborhood started treating me differently. Someone spray-painted liar in red paint on the door of our apartment building. The landlord made me clean it off. Emma got bullied at school. Kids said their parents told them Emma's mom was a criminal. A teacher pulled me aside to say Emma had become withdrawn and anxious. She recommended counseling, which I couldn't afford. I was destroying my daughter's childhood. For what? For justice? For principle? Was it worth it? The night before my grand jury testimony, I didn't sleep at all. I sat up reviewing my notes, making sure I had every fact straight, every date memorized. Beth had coached me on how to answer questions. Be clear. Be concise. Stick to what you know. Don't speculate. At 6 a.m, Agent Patterson picked me up. He drove me to the federal courthouse downtown, a massive stone building that looked like a fortress. We went through security. He led me to a waiting room. "You're going to do great," he said. "Just tell the truth." At 9:30, they called me in. The grand jury room was smaller than I expected. 23 people sitting in rows. A court reporter. 2 prosecutors I'd met with before. No judge. No defense attorneys. Just them and me. I was sworn in. I sat in the witness chair, and I told my story. Every detail. The wage theft I'd discovered. Diana's dismissal of my report. My firing. The retaliation. The evidence I'd preserved. The timeline of events. The documents I'd provided. The prosecutors asked me questions. Clear, direct questions. I answered each one. Some of the grand jurors asked questions too. They wanted to know why I'd kept the documents, why I'd waited to report, why I hadn't gone to the police first. I explained everything. My voice shook a few times, but I didn't break down. I stayed focused. After 3 hours, they thanked me. I was dismissed. I walked out of that room not knowing if I'd done enough, if they'd believed me, if any of this mattered. Agent Patterson was waiting in the hallway. "You did great. Now we wait." The grand jury deliberated for 6 days. 6 agonizing days where I checked my phone constantly, waiting for news. During that time, Susan got a strange call from Westbridge's attorneys. They wanted to settle the civil case. They'd drop all claims against me. They'd pay me $50,000. All I had to do was sign a non-disclosure agreement and go away quietly. "They're panicking," Susan said. "This means they know the criminal indictments are coming. They want to tie up loose ends before everything blows up. What should I do? It's your choice. But if you take the money, you'll be silenced. You won't be able to talk about any of this ever again. And they'll use the settlement to claim you lied for a payout." I thought about it for maybe 10 seconds. No. Tell them no. On a Thursday morning, Agent Patterson called me. One word. Done. The grand jury had issued indictments. Craig Thornton was charged with wire fraud, conspiracy to defraud the United States, and theft of government property. Diana Kruger was charged with conspiracy, obstruction of justice, and witness tampering for her attempts to silence me. 7 other executives were also charged with various counts related to the scheme. The indictments were unsealed at noon. Within 30 minutes, it was national news. Major government contractor accused of $7 million fraud. My name was in every article, identified as the whistleblower whose complaint triggered the investigation. Westbridge Technologies' stock price dropped 42% in one day. The company issued a statement claiming the charges were false and politically motivated. They blamed disgruntled former employees making false accusations, but the damage was done. Their reputation was shattered. I want to tell you about the moment from the thumbnail now. The moment that made Diana realize she'd made a catastrophic mistake. It happened 3 weeks before the indictments. Agent Patterson had gone to Westbridge as part of the investigation. He'd requested an interview with Diana and Craig. They agreed, thinking they could charm their way out of trouble. Their attorneys were present. They all sat in the executive boardroom, that sleek glass and steel room, where decisions worth millions were made. Agent Patterson had asked Diana to explain my termination. She'd been happy to, proud, even. She'd pulled up the email on her tablet, the one she'd sent company-wide with my photo and that humiliating text. She'd shown it to him like it was evidence of her good management. Georgia Martinez was a problem employee, Diana had said. She violated clear company policy by leaving early without authorization. I made an example of her to set the precedent that rules apply to everyone. It was a justifiable termination. Agent Patterson had let her talk. He'd taken notes. He'd nodded along, and then he'd opened his binder. He'd flipped to a specific page and read aloud. Title 41, United States Code, Section 4712, Whistleblower Protection for Federal Contractor Employees. Quote, an employee of a contractor may not be discharged, demoted, or otherwise discriminated against as a reprisal for disclosing to a person or body described in paragraph 2 information that the employee reasonably believes is evidence of gross mismanagement of a federal contract, gross waste of federal funds, an abuse of authority relating to a federal contract, a substantial and specific danger to public health or safety, or a violation of law, rule, or regulation related to a federal contract. End quote. The room had gone silent. Craig's face had drained of color. Diana had opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came out. You sent an email to your entire company, Agent Patterson had continued, terminating and publicly humiliating an employee for leaving 1 minute early. But Miss Martinez had reported a systematic wage theft scheme affecting dozens of employees just weeks before her termination. What you really fired her for was being a whistleblower. That's not just wrongful termination. That's a federal crime. Diana had tried to backtrack. No, that's not. The timing was coincidental. She violated policy. Everything you've just said to me is on the record, Patterson had said. This interview is being recorded with your consent. You've just admitted to retaliatory termination of a federal whistleblower. I strongly suggest you and Mr. Thornton speak with your attorneys. That was the moment. That was when Diana realized she'd destroyed her entire career over 1 minute. One stupid, petty, vindictive minute. Now, 3 weeks later, with indictments in hand, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Not quite joy, not quite relief, but satisfaction. Deep, bone-deep satisfaction. The day after the indictments went public, my phone rang. Unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but I was tired of being afraid. Miss Martinez? My name is Robert Chen. I froze at the name Chen, but then I remembered he was calling me. Not a character in the story. I'm the CEO of Axiom Systems. We're a tech company similar to Westbridge, but we actually believe in doing things ethically. I've been following your case closely. Your integrity and courage are remarkable. I'd like to offer you a position as our Chief Compliance Officer. I couldn't speak. He continued. The salary is $130,000 a year. Full benefits. $20,000 signing bonus. Flexible schedule, because I understand you have a daughter. I think you're exactly the kind of person we need to make sure we never become what Westbridge was. I started crying. I couldn't help it. After months of being treated like a criminal, someone saw my value. When can you start? He asked. The legal proceedings against Craig Thornton and Diana Kruger took 9 months. Both of them hired the best defense attorneys money could buy. They tried every tactic, claiming the charges were politically motivated, blaming subordinates, arguing the fraud was unintentional, just accounting errors. But the evidence was overwhelming. Emails, billing records, testimony from employees who'd been pressured to alter timekeeping data. My documentation, Agent Patterson's investigation. It all painted a clear picture of deliberate, systematic fraud. Craig Thornton accepted a plea deal first. He pleaded guilty to wire fraud and conspiracy. The judge sentenced him to 4 years in federal prison and ordered him to pay $2 million in restitution. I watched from the gallery as they led him away. He looked small without his expensive suits and confident swagger. Diana held out longer. She actually went to trial. I had to testify. For 3 hours, her defense attorney tried to destroy me on the stand, questioned my motives, suggested I'd fabricated evidence for a payout, implied I was unstable. But I held firm. I answered every question truthfully, and the jury saw through the smokescreen. They convicted Diana on all counts. She was sentenced to 18 months in federal prison and barred from ever working in HR or management again. 7 other executives received sentences ranging from probation to 2 years. All of them were ordered to pay fines and restitution. Westbridge Technologies hemorrhaged money. They lost every federal contract they held. Other clients dropped them. The scandal destroyed their reputation. 6 months after the indictments, they filed for bankruptcy. The company that had seemed so powerful, so untouchable, ceased to exist. The civil lawsuit against me was dismissed with prejudice, meaning Westbridge couldn't ever refile. The judge sanctioned their attorneys for filing a frivolous case designed to intimidate a whistleblower. The business newspaper that had run negative stories about me published a front-page profile, calling me a hero who stood up to corporate corruption. My reputation was fully restored. Former colleagues reached out. Some apologized for not supporting me. Some admitted they'd been afraid to speak up, but wished they'd been braver. I appreciated the apologies, but I also understood. Not everyone can afford to be brave. Not everyone is in a position to fight. I'd been lucky, if you could call it that. Lucky that I had documentation. Lucky that I found Susan. Lucky that Agent Patterson believed me. The financial reward came through 8 months after the indictments. Under the False Claims Act, I received 18% of the government's total recovery, which ended up being nearly $2 million. After taxes and legal fees, I netted about $1,300,000. I sat in my new apartment, the one I'd rented before the money came through, and stared at my bank balance. 7 figures. I'd never imagined having that kind of money. I cried. I called Susan and thanked her. I called Agent Patterson and thanked him, and then I started planning. I paid off every debt. The medical bill from my collapse. The back rent I owed. Every dollar I'd borrowed. I set up a college fund for Emma, fully funded, enough to send her to any school she wanted. I bought a small house in a good school district. Nothing fancy. 3 bedrooms, a yard for Emma to play in, a porch where I could sit and watch the sunset. It felt like a palace after that one-room efficiency with bars on the windows. I donated $50,000 to a legal aid organization that helps whistleblowers who can't afford attorneys because I'd been lucky to find Susan. Not everyone is that lucky. Emma transformed once we had stability again. She started therapy to process the trauma of those awful months. She was resilient. More resilient than I'd given her credit for. She made friends at her new school. She started smiling again, laughing again, drawing pictures of houses with gardens, and now we actually had one. One evening, about a year after everything, she asked me, "Mommy, was it worth it? All the hard stuff we went through?" I thought about it carefully. I've never lied to my daughter about the big things. "Yes," I told her. "Sometimes doing the right thing costs you everything in the short term. You lose your job, your money, your reputation. People you thought were friends abandon you. But in the long term, you keep something more valuable, your integrity. And that's something nobody can ever take from you." I started my new job as Chief Compliance Officer at Axiom Systems 2 months after the money came through. I could have retired, lived off the settlement, but I wanted to work. I wanted to build something good. I wanted to make sure what happened at Westbridge never happened again. I became known in the industry as a fierce advocate for ethical business practices and whistleblower protection. I spoke at conferences. I mentored young compliance professionals. I consulted with lawmakers on strengthening corporate accountability laws. I found purpose in my pain. I turned my nightmare into a mission. 2 years after everything, I ran into Tom Hayes at a professional conference. He approached me cautiously, shame written all over his face. "Georgia, I need to apologize. I should have stood up for you. I was a coward. I've regretted it every day since. I saw the genuine remorse in his eyes. He'd left Westbridge after the scandal and struggled to find work because of his association with the company. He was a good person who'd made a bad choice out of fear. I understood that better than most. I forgive you, I said. Courage isn't about being fearless. It's about doing what's right, even when you're terrified. You can learn that. It's never too late. I actually helped him get an interview at a smaller firm where I had connections. He got the job. Last I heard, he was doing well. The deeper lesson I learned through all of this is something I think about every day. When I was at my lowest, when Emma and I were eating peanut butter sandwiches in that awful room with bars on the windows, when I thought we'd lose everything, I wondered if fighting back was worth it, if principle mattered more than survival, if one person could actually make a difference against a powerful institution. The answer is yes, but it's complicated. I learned that I'm stronger than I ever knew, that I could endure things I never thought possible, that my daughter was watching, and by refusing to back down, I taught her something more valuable than I ever could have with words. I taught her that you don't let bullies win, that you speak truth even when your voice shakes. That integrity isn't about convenience. It's about who you are when everything is on the line. I learned that the system, while imperfect, can work if you're willing to fight for it. It took Agent Patterson believing me. It took Susan taking my case. It took a grand jury willing to listen. It took prosecutors willing to pursue justice. Not everyone gets that lucky. But the system exists. And sometimes, if you're brave enough to use it, it works. I learned that powerful people count on silence. They count on fear. They count on you being too exhausted, too broke, too scared to fight back. And most of the time, they're right. Most people can't afford to fight. Most people have to choose survival over principle, and there's no shame in that. But sometimes, rarely, someone is in a position to fight. And when that happens, it changes things. One evening, about 2 years after everything, I tucked Emma into bed in our new house. Our real house with the garden and the porch and the safety she deserved. She looked up at me with those hazel eyes, so much wiser now than they should be at 9 years old. "Mom, I'm proud of you," she said. "You did the right thing even when it was really hard." Those words meant more to me than the money. More than the job. More than any apology or validation. My daughter understood. She'd lived through hell because of my choices. And she understood. When powerful people do wrong, I told her, they count on everyone being too scared to speak up. But silence is how they win. Your voice, even when it shakes, even when you're terrified, is the most powerful weapon you have. I wasn't brave because I wasn't scared. I was terrified. Every single day. But I couldn't live with staying silent. And that decision changed everything. She hugged me tight and fell asleep. I sat on her bed for a while, watching her breathe, thinking about the journey we'd been on. Diana Kruger fired me over 1 minute. 1 single minute. She tried to destroy my entire life, because I'd left work at 4:59 instead of 5. But in trying to silence me, she triggered her own destruction. She lost her freedom, her career, her reputation. Craig Thornton lost everything. Westbridge Technologies ceased to exist. And me? I have my daughter, my integrity, financial security, and a career I'm proud of. I have a purpose. I have peace. I think about that moment in the boardroom sometimes. When Agent Patterson opened his binder and read that single line of federal law aloud. When Diana realized she'd committed a federal crime by firing me. When her face went pale and all her power evaporated in an instant. I wasn't there to see it, but I've imagined it 1,000 times. That moment when she understood that she'd destroyed her own life over one petty, vindictive decision. Justice took time. It took months of agony. It took sacrifice and risk and terror. But it came. And I learned that sometimes the smallest acts of courage lead to the biggest changes. Sometimes one person really can bring down an empire built on lies. I sit on my porch now in the evenings, watching Emma play in the yard, watching the sunset paint the sky orange and pink. I'm not the same person I was 3 years ago. That Georgia was naive. She believed following rules and doing good work would protect her. She thought the system was fair. This Georgia knows better. She knows the world is harder than that. But she also knows she's harder. She knows she can survive things that would have broken her old self. She knows that integrity costs something, but the cost of losing it is higher. I'm no longer the woman who got fired for leaving 1 minute early. I'm the woman who stood up, fought back, and won. I'm the woman who turned injustice into accountability. I'm the woman who taught her daughter that courage matters. And that's worth everything. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever had to make a choice between what was easy and what was right? Have you ever blown the whistle on wrongdoing at work? Or wished you had? What would you do in my situation? Would you fight back or walk away? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one, and I'd love to hear your perspective. If this story moved you or inspired you, please hit that like button. It helps more people find these stories of real courage and real consequences. And if you haven't already, subscribe to this channel. We share stories about standing up for what's right, about surviving injustice, about finding strength you didn't know you had. There are so many more stories to tell, and I don't want you to miss them. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe someone going through their own workplace nightmare. Maybe someone considering whether to speak up about something wrong. Maybe someone who just needs a reminder that good people can win sometimes. Your share might be exactly what someone needs today. Thank you for listening to my story. Thank you for being here. I hope that whatever challenges you're facing, you find the courage to face them with integrity. I hope you remember that your voice matters, even when it shakes. I hope you know that you're stronger than you think. Take care of yourselves. Stand up for what's right. And remember, sometimes the smallest act of defiance changes everything.